Ethan's head throbbed as consciousness returned to him. The first sensation was dampness, thick, humid air pressing against his skin. The second was pain, a sharp ache radiating from his temple. He blinked, opened his eyes to a canopy of massive violet-tinged leaves and twisted vines that loomed overhead, filtering alien sunlight into a strange mosaic of shadows. "Systems check," he mumbled, his voice raspy. He tried to sit up, wincing as his muscles protested. The movement sent a cascade of small debris sliding off his flight suit. How long had he been lying here? The escape pod was a twisted wreck several feet away, partially embedded in the spongy forest floor. Smoke no longer rose from it, which meant he'd been unconscious for hours at least. Ethan dragged himself to the pod, ignoring the stabbing pain in his ribs, and reached for the emergency beacon. The device was cracked, its internal components exposed and lifeless. "Perfect," he muttered, tossing it aside. The communication array was in even worse shape, a mangled mess of wires and shattered panels. Ethan sank down against the pod's hull, trying to collect his thoughts. He'd been part of the Stellar Exploration Initiative's mission to chart the far reaches of the Andromeda sector. His small scout ship had been caught in some kind of atmospheric disturbance, a storm unlike anything in the mission briefings. The last thing he remembered was initiating emergency protocols and aiming for the least threatening landmass on the uncharted planet. Ethan took inventory of his supplies: a multi-tool, emergency rations for 3 days, a canteen, a portable scanner with limited functionality, and a small blaster for protection. Hardly sufficient for extended survival on an unknown world. The forest around him pulsed with life. Chirping, clicking, rustling sounds echoed from all directions. Strange bioluminescent insects darted between enormous tree trunks. Plants that resembled ferns but had skin-like texture swayed despite the lack of breeze. Everything seemed just familiar enough to be recognizable, yet alien enough to set his nerves on edge. "First things first," Ethan said aloud, finding comfort in the sound of his own voice. "Find water, then shelter." He packed what little salvageable equipment remained and began heading toward what his scanner suggested might be a water source. The forest floor was soft and springy beneath his boots, occasionally releasing puffs of spores that glittered in the filtered light. Hours passed as he made his way through increasingly dense vegetation. The persistent feeling of being watched prickled at the back of his neck. On the third time he glanced back, Ethan caught a flicker of movement among the massive tree trunks. He froze, hand hovering over his blaster. Something or someone was tracking him. "Hello?" he called out, immediately regretting breaking the silence. "I'm not a threat." More rustling, then silence. Ethan continued forward, more cautiously now. The scanner indicated he was approaching water, but the readings were becoming erratic. A sudden loud crack made him jump, a branch snapping somewhere nearby. He spun around, blaster now drawn, and found himself face to face with a figure partially hidden in the shadows of a massive tree. "Don't move," he warned, aiming his weapon with unsteady hands. The figure stepped forward, and Ethan's breath caught in his throat. She was tall, taller than him by several inches, with a lean, athletic build accentuated by fitted garments made from what appeared to be leather and plant fibers. Her skin was a warm bronze, covered in places with intricate patterns that might have been tattoos or natural markings. But what truly captured his attention were her non-human features. Large, pointed ears covered in short golden fur that extended from the sides of her head, and a long, elegant tail that swayed behind her with deliberate movements. Her eyes were unlike any he'd seen, vertical pupils within amber irises that seemed to glow in the forest's dim light. She carried a spear of polished wood tipped with a material that gleamed like metal but appeared organic in structure. Her stance was defensive but confident, suggesting she was far more at home in this environment than he could ever be. They regarded each other in tense silence. Ethan slowly lowered his blaster, recognizing that escalation would be unwise. "I'm lost," he said, using the universal translator function of his wrist device. "My ship crashed. I mean no harm." The woman tilted her head, her large ears twitching forward in what seemed to be curiosity or confusion. She spoke, and his translator struggled for several seconds before producing a rough approximation of her language. Skyfallen, not tribe. Why here? Accident, Ethan repeated, gesturing toward the direction of his crash site. I need help. Water. Food. She approached cautiously, circled slowly around him, observing his strange appearance with equal parts fascination and suspicion. Her tail flicked back and forth, betraying her agitation. You smell wrong. The translation came through. Metal and burning. Sorry about that. Ethan attempted a smile. I've had a rough landing. As she circled behind him, Ethan turned to keep her in view, stumbling slightly on the uneven ground. The alien woman moved with startling speed to steady him, and in that moment of unexpected contact, his hand inadvertently brushed against the back of her ear, dislodging a small leaf that had been caught in the delicate fur there. The effect was instantaneous and alarming. The woman recoiled as if struck, her eyes widening in shock. She dropped her spear and stepped back, one hand covering her ear, her expression a mixture of outrage and disbelief. You touched, she stammered, the translator struggling to keep up with her rapid speech. My ears. Without permission, Ethan raised his hands in a universal gesture of apology. I'm sorry. It was an accident. I didn't mean to. Silence, she hissed, retrieving her spear and pointing it directly at his chest. You don't understand what you've done. Then explain it to me, Ethan replied, confusion and fear mingling in his voice. Her ears flattened against her head as she regarded him with a mixture of anger and something else. Embarrassment? To touch ears is sacred. It means. She seemed to struggle for words the translator could handle. It means claiming. Mating. You have initiated through the binding. Ethan paled as the implications set in. I had no idea. It was an accident, I swear. Accident or not, she said firmly. It is done. The elders must decide your fate now. She gestured with her spear. You will come to village. Now. And if I refuse? Ethan asked, though he already suspected the answer. The woman's eyes narrowed dangerously. Then I hunt you. And I never fail a hunt. With reluctance and mounting anxiety, Ethan nodded his agreement. The woman moved behind him, keeping a careful distance now, her spear prodding him forward. What's your name? He asked as they began the journey. She was silent for so long he thought she might not answer. Finally, she spoke a single word. Rima. I'm Ethan. Ethan, she repeated, the name sounding exotic in her accent. Skyfallen who touches ears without permission. The elders will find this interesting. As they trekked deeper into the forest, Ethan couldn't help wondering if he might have been better off taking his chances with the wildlife. The journey to Rima's village took nearly 2 hours, during which she maintained a cold silence, directing Ethan with occasional gestures of her spear. The forest gradually changed around them, the untamed wilderness giving way to subtle signs of habitation. Ethan noticed carved symbols on certain trees, carefully placed stones marking what might be territory boundaries, and eventually narrow pathways worn into the forest floor. When they finally reached the village, Ethan stopped in his tracks, momentarily forgetting his predicament as he took in the sight before him. Massive trees that dwarfed even the giants he'd seen earlier formed natural pillars for an entire community built into their trunks and spreading branches. Dwellings crafted from a combination of wood, bark, and some kind of resin created an organic architecture that blended seamlessly with the forest. Suspension bridges of woven vines connected the various levels, and platforms wrapped around the enormous trunks, creating spaces for communal activities. In the center of the settlement, a large clearing housed a fire pit surrounded by stone seats. The flames burned a strange blue-green color, casting an ethereal light across the gathering space. The villagers noticed their approach immediately. Children, smaller versions of Rima with even larger ears and shorter tails, stopped their play to stare. Adults paused in their tasks, some reaching for weapons, others backing away. All exhibited the same distinctive features. The fur-covered, expressive ears, the long, dexterous tails, vertical pupilled eyes in various shades of amber and gold, and the same intricate patterns across their bronze skin. "Outsider," someone hissed, the words spreading through the community like wildfire. "Rima brings Sky Person. Why is it alive?" Ethan kept his gaze forward, trying to ignore the hostile stares and murmured threats. Rima led him directly to the central fire pit, where three elderly individuals sat on elevated stone seats. They were distinguished from the others by elaborate decorations on their ears, small beads and metal rings embedded in the fur, and their tails were wrapped in dyed leather bindings marked with symbols Ethan didn't recognize. "Elders," Rima addressed them with a respectful bow of her head. "I bring a Sky Fallen." His vessel crashed in the Northern Territory. The central elder, a female with silver-streaked hair and patterns that seemed more elaborate than the others, leaned forward to study Ethan. "Why does this creature still breathe? Hunter Rima," she asked, her voice carrying despite its softness. "The law is clear about those who fall from the sky." Ethan swallowed hard. This wasn't going well. "There is a complication, Elder Sora," Rima replied, and Ethan detected discomfort in her voice. "The Sky Fallen? He performed Tisaru upon me." A collective gasp rose from the gathering crowd. The elder's expressions shifted from disdain to shock. "Explain," commanded Elder Sora. Rima recounted their encounter, describing how Ethan had touched her ear. As she spoke, the crowd's murmurs grew louder, more agitated. Ethan noticed several young males glaring at him with undisguised hostility. "It was an accident," Ethan interjected when Rima finished. "I didn't know the significance of—" "Silence," roared the male elder to Sora's right. "You do not speak unless addressed directly, Sky Fallen." Elder Sora raised a hand for quiet. "The situation is unprecedented. If true Tisaru was performed, even in ignorance, there are only two paths forward according to our laws." She fixed Ethan with a penetrating stare. "Either you complete the mating ritual with Hunter Rima, binding yourselves together in the eyes of ancestors and tribe." She paused, and Ethan felt cold dread spreading through him. "Or both of you face Kazari, the punishment of the rejected bond. Exile at best. Sacrifice to the forest at worst." "Elder," Rima protested, "surely there must be another way. The Sky Fallen didn't know our ways. And I am the tribe's best hunter. You need me for the coming winter season." "The laws are ancient and absolute," replied the third elder, an elderly female with clouded eyes suggesting partial blindness. "The ears are sacred messengers to our ancestors. Their violation cannot go unanswered." Elder Sora nodded. "You have until the next full moon to complete the mating ritual or face Kazari together. Until then, the Sky Fallen remains in your custody, Hunter Rima. You are responsible for his actions." "But Elder," Rima began. "The decision is made." Elder Sora cut her off. "Take him to the visitor's dwelling. Teach him our ways if you wish him to survive among us. The ancestors will reveal the right path." With that pronouncement, the elders rose and departed, leaving Ethan and Rima surrounded by curious and hostile villagers. One muscular male stepped forward, his tail lashing in obvious agitation. "This is an outrage, Rima," he growled. "An outsider cannot simply claim our best hunter. I challenge." "Not now, Garo," Rima snapped. "The elders have spoken." Garo's eyes narrowed, his gaze shifting between Rima and Ethan. "This isn't over," he warned before stalking away. Rima grabbed Ethan's arm and pulled him away from the gathering, leading him toward a small dwelling at the edge of the village, a simple structure built against the trunk of a smaller tree, close to the ground. "This is where outsiders stay when they visit for trading," she explained, shoving him inside. "It has been empty for many cycles." The interior was Spartan, a raised platform that presumably served as a bed, a small table carved from a single piece of wood, and little else. A small window covered with some kind of translucent material let in filtered light. "I'll bring you food and water," Remus said, pausing at the entrance. "Don't leave this dwelling without me. Some would gladly kill you, especially after what happened today." "Rima," Ethan called as she turned to leave. "I truly am sorry." I had no idea what touching your ear meant." She regarded him for a long moment, her tail twitching with agitation. "Your ignorance has endangered us both. Now we must find a way through this mess you've created. What exactly is this mating ritual they mentioned? And what's Kazari?" Rima's ears flattened against her head. "The mating ritual is complex. It requires proving compatibility, strength, wisdom. As for Kazari," she shuddered slightly, "it is the punishment for those who reject a bond after Tisseru. In the old days, both would be offered to the shadow beasts. Now it means exile, but few survive alone in the deep forest. So either we, mate," Ethan struggled with the word, "or we're both exiled, or worse." "Now you understand our problem," Rima replied dryly. "Rest. Tomorrow will be difficult." With that, she left, securing the dwelling's door behind her. Ethan sank onto the sleeping platform, his head spinning with the day's events. Less than 24 hours ago, he'd been aboard his scout ship, dutifully charting star patterns. Now he was trapped on an unknown planet, accidentally engaged to an alien woman with ears he wasn't supposed to touch, and facing either an interspecies marriage or death by exile. Should have become a botanist like Mom wanted, he muttered to himself, lying back and staring at the ceiling, wondering how in the universe he was going to get out of this mess. Morning arrived with a shaft of golden light streaming through the small window, accompanied by unfamiliar bird-like calls and the distant sounds of village life. Ethan had slept fitfully, his dreams filled with pursuing shadows and accusing amber eyes. He sat up, wincing at his stiff muscles. The sleeping platform, while better than the forest floor, was clearly not designed for human comfort. The door swung open without warning, and Rima entered carrying a wooden tray. Her expression was guarded, but less openly hostile than the previous day. "Eat," she commanded, setting the tray beside him. It contained fruits he didn't recognize, some purple, some with iridescent skin, and what appeared to be strips of dried meat, along with a clay cup of water. Ethan picked up one of the smaller fruits, cautiously. "Is this safe for my physiology?" Rima's tail swished in what he was beginning to recognize as impatience. "The trading parties from other regions eat these without issue. Your kind isn't so different in what you can consume." Taking a tentative bite, Ethan found the fruit had a tangy, almost citrus-like flavor that was surprisingly pleasant. The meat was gamier than he was accustomed to, but edible. "Thank you," he said after finishing most of the meal. "What happens now?" "Now we begin your instructions in our ways," Rima replied. "The elders have declared that if you are to participate in the mating ritual, you must first understand our customs and prove your worth to the tribe." She seemed resigned, yet determined. "We begin with village duties. You will help gather materials for the bridge repair." After Ethan finished eating, Rima led him outside. In daylight, the village was even more impressive, the massive trees creating a cathedral-like canopy above the various dwellings and platforms. Villagers went about their morning routines, some tending to small garden plots, others working on crafts or preparing equipment for hunting. All paused to stare as Ethan passed. Young children followed at a distance, giggling and pointing at his ears, so small and round compared to theirs. One bold child came closer, extending a small hand toward Ethan's ear before being sharply called back by an alarmed parent. "Your ears are considered deficient," Rima explained, noticing his confusion. "They wonder how you hear anything with such tiny receptors." "They work well enough," Ethan replied with a wry smile, "though they're not as expressive as yours." Indeed, Rima's large ears were almost constantly in motion, twitching toward sounds, flattening with annoyance, perking up with attention. They added a dimension to her expressions that human faces lacked. They reached a group of younger tribe members working near one of the larger suspension bridges. They were processing long, fibrous vines, stripping the outer layer, soaking the resulting fibers in some kind of resin, then twisting them into incredibly strong cords. "This is Keela and Taru." Rima introduced two workers who seemed less openly hostile than the others. "They will show you the process." Keela, a female with unusual spotted patterns on her forearms, demonstrated the technique for preparing the vines. Ethan's first attempts were clumsy. The vines were tougher than they looked, and the sticky resin got everywhere. The others laughed at his struggles, but Keela's instructions remained patient. By midday, his hands were raw and covered in resin, but he'd managed to produce several usable lengths of cord. Taru, a quieter male with an impressive scar running along his jaw, nodded with grudging approval. "Not terrible for a sky fallen with weak hands," he commented. Throughout the morning, Ethan observed the complex social dynamics of the tribe. There was clear hierarchy based on hunting prowess and age, with the elders at the top and young children at the bottom. Rima, he realized, held significant status. Others deferred to her decisions and sought her opinion on hunting matters. No wonder his accidental claiming of her had caused such an uproar. After the bridge work, Rima took him to the village center where lunch was being prepared, some kind of communal stew cooked over the blue-green flames. As they approached, conversation died down and many villagers moved away, creating an uncomfortable void around them. "They fear you will contaminate the food," Rima murmured. "I will bring portions to the side seating." While waiting, Ethan noticed a group of younger tribe members listening to an elderly storyteller. His translator caught fragments about the old days and when the stars fell. Curious, he edged closer. "Long ago," the elder was saying, "others like this one came from the sky and metal birds. They brought strange objects, unknown illnesses, and false promises. Many of our ancestors died from their invisible poisons. The survivors retreated deeper into the forest, learning to avoid those who fall from above." Ethan's heart sank. No wonder they were so distrustful. Some previous contact with outsiders, perhaps an early colonization attempt or research mission gone wrong, had left deep cultural scars. A shadow fell across him, and Ethan looked up to find Garo looming over him, several other athletic tribe members at his back. "Listening to our stories, Sky Thing?" Garo sneered. "They tell of how your kind destroys everything you touch." Ethan stood slowly, aware that an aggressive move would be disastrous. "I'm just trying to understand your culture. I mean, no disrespect. You disrespected our entire tribe when you claimed our greatest hunter." Garo stepped closer, his tail rigid with anger. "Rima is meant for a strong mate who can protect and provide, not some weak, earless creature who cannot even prepare a simple vine." "I've apologized for the misunderstanding," Ethan replied, keeping his voice level. "I'm trying to learn your ways. Some things cannot be learned." Garo's hand moved to a blade at his belt. "Some things must be in the blood." "Enough, Garo." Rima's voice cut through the tension as she approached with 2 bowls of stew. "The elders have made their decision. Challenge it if you dare." Garo's ears flicked back in irritation, but he stepped away. "The elders' wisdom sometimes fails with age. This creature will bring nothing but misfortune to our tribe. And to you." With a final glare at Ethan, he stalked off, his companions following. "You've made an enemy," Rima observed as they sat to eat. "I gathered that," Ethan replied. "He seems possessive of you." Rima's ears twitched. "Garo has wanted to perform Tisaru with me for many seasons. I have declined. He believes it is because I am waiting for a stronger partner." "And are you?" Ethan asked before he could stop himself. Her amber eyes fixed on him. "I was focused on becoming lead hunter when Elder Mako steps down. Mating complications would interfere with that goal." She sighed. "Now, thanks to your clumsy hands, everything is uncertain." After lunch, Rima introduced Ethan to more village activities. He learned how they harvested water from enormous leaves that collected rainfall, how they preserved meat using smoke from specific woods, and how their dwellings were constructed to move with the living trees rather than constraining them. As the day progressed, Ethan noticed a gradual shift in some villagers' attitudes. His willingness to work and learn seemed to soften their hostility, if only slightly. A few even approached with curious questions about the sky world and his journey. His translator struggled with technical terminology, but he managed to convey basic concepts about space travel. By evening, exhaustion had set in. Every muscle ached from unaccustomed labor, and his hands were blistered from the vine work. When Rima finally led him back to his dwelling, he He collapsed onto the sleeping platform with a groan. "You performed adequately today," Remus said, the closest thing to a compliment he'd received from her. "Tomorrow we test different skills." "What kind of skills?" Ethan asked warily. "Hunting," she replied simply. "If you cannot contribute to feeding the tribe, you have no place here, mating ritual or not." With that ominous pronouncement, she left him to his thoughts. Despite his exhaustion, sleep eluded Ethan for hours as he contemplated his situation. The cultural gap seemed impossibly wide, the chance of successfully integrating into this society remote at best. Yet the alternative, exile or worse, was hardly appealing. His thoughts turned to Rima. Despite her initial hostility, she'd been fair throughout the day, defending him from Garo and teaching him with remarkable patience. There was something compelling about her confidence, her skill, the way she moved through the forest as if she were part of it. Under different circumstances, Ethan shook his head at the ridiculous direction of his thoughts. Stockholm Syndrome setting in already, he mused grimly. Still, as sleep finally claimed him, his last conscious thought was of amber eyes and twitching ears. The hunting expedition began before dawn. Rima woke Ethan while stars still glimmered between the canopy branches, thrusting a bundle of clothing at him. "Change into these," she ordered. "Your coverings reflect too much light and make too much noise." The garments were similar to what the tribe wore, fitted leggings and a sleeveless tunic made from some plant-based fabric that felt like soft leather against the skin. They smelled of herbs and smoke and were surprisingly comfortable despite being slightly too large around the shoulders. Rima's eyes widened slightly when he emerged. "You look less wrong," she conceded, adjusting one of the fastenings at his shoulder. The brief contact sent an unexpected jolt through Ethan, which he attributed to nerves about the upcoming hunt. A small party had gathered at the village edge, Taru from yesterday, too. Females Ethan hadn't met, and to his dismay, Garo. All carried various weapons. Spears with those strange metal-organic tips, bows with arrows fletched in bright colors, and curved blades that resemble machetes. "The Sky Thing hunts with us." Garo's tone made it clear what he thought of that idea. "Elder Sora's orders," Rima replied curtly. "He must learn all aspects of tribe life." She handed Ethan a short spear and a knife. "These are sized for younger hunters. They should suit your strength level." The implied insult stung, but Ethan accepted the weapons without comment. He'd had basic survival training as part of his space exploration preparation, but hunting alien wildlife was definitely not in the curriculum. The group moved silently into the forest, leaving the safety of the village behind. In the pre-dawn light, the massive trees took on ghostly qualities, their enormous trunks disappearing into mist above. Strange luminescent fungi cast eerie blue light across the path, and unseen creatures made clicking and chittering sounds in the distance. Rima moved at the front, her every step deliberate and soundless. Ethan tried to mimic her movements, but found himself constantly stumbling over roots or stepping on twigs that announced his presence. Each time, Garo would snort with derision or make a cutting remark about clumsy sky feet. After an hour's trek, they reached a small clearing where several paths converged. A watering spot, Ethan realized, noting the trampled vegetation and numerous tracks in the mud. With hand signals, Rima positioned everyone strategically around the clearing. Ethan was paired with Taru, who pointed to a fallen log where they could conceal themselves while maintaining a view of the area. "Stay quiet," Taru whispered. "Morning drink comes soon." They settled into position. Minutes stretched into an hour of uncomfortable stillness. Ethan's muscles began to cramp, but he dared not move for fear of ruining the hunt. Just as he thought he couldn't bear it any longer, Taru, tense beside him, eyes fixed on the far side of the clearing. A creature emerged from the underbrush, something like a deer, but with 6 limbs and spiral protrusions from its head. It moved cautiously, its large ears, not unlike the tribe's, Ethan noted, rotating constantly to detect danger. Behind it, 2 smaller versions, offspring, presumably, followed with equal caution. Rima made a subtle motion from her position. The hunters readied their weapons. Ethan gripped his spear, though he had no intention of using it. He couldn't bring himself to harm these beautiful creatures. The signal came, a bird call so natural Ethan almost missed it. In perfect coordination, the hunters burst from cover. The creatures bolted, but the hunters had anticipated their escape route. Spears flew with remarkable accuracy. Everything happened too quickly. One of the adult creatures veered unexpectedly toward Ethan's position. Taru moved to intercept, but slipped on the wet ground. The creature charged forward in panic, its spiral horns aimed directly at Ethan. Pure instinct took over. Ethan dove aside, rolling across the muddy ground. As he came up, he found himself directly in the path of a second, larger beast that had been hidden in the undergrowth, a predator that had likely been stalking the deer-like creatures. This animal was something from a nightmare, reptilian with mammalian features, its body covered in scales and patches of fur, 6 limbs ending in vicious claws, and a jaw that split 4 ways to reveal rows of needle-like teeth. It had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike, and the hunter's activity had driven it straight toward Ethan. Time seemed to slow. Ethan heard shouts of alarm, saw Rima racing toward him, spear raised. The predator lunged. Ethan, still clutching his knife, instinctively rolled beneath its attack, feeling the rush of air as massive jaws snapped where his head had been a second earlier. Coming up behind the creature, Ethan spotted what appeared to be a vulnerable spot, a patch of softer tissue where neck met thorax. Without conscious thought, he drove his knife upward into the spot. The beast released an ear-splitting shriek and thrashed violently, throwing Ethan aside like a rag doll. He slammed into a tree trunk, pain exploding across his back. Through blurred vision, he saw Rima and Garo converging on the wounded predator, working with surprising coordination to bring it down. When the beast finally collapsed, Ethan managed to stagger to his feet, every breath sending shocks of pain through his ribs. "You're bleeding," Taru observed, appearing at his side. Ethan looked down to see a long gash across his forearm, courtesy of the creature's claws. "Just a scratch," he gasped, though the wound was deeper than he wanted to admit. Rima approached, her expression unreadable. Behind her, Garo and the others were already field dressing the massive predator. "That was Ksari, apex predator of the Middle Forest," she said. "Few encounter one and live." She examined his wound with clinical detachment. "Your strike was fortunate. You hit the nerve cluster that controls its front limbs." "Lucky guess," Ethan managed through gritted teeth. "Perhaps." Rima tilted her head, studying him. "But you moved without hesitation, and you saved Taru from being impaled by the grazer." Taru nodded in acknowledgement. "I owe you blood debt, Skyfall." "Ethan." He corrected himself, using Ethan's name for the first time. Rima produced a pouch from her belt and extracted a paste that smelled strongly of mint and something earthier. "This will prevent poison spread," she explained, applying it to his wound before binding it with a strip of clean cloth from another pouch. Her touch was surprisingly gentle. As she worked, Ethan noticed details he'd missed before. The slight variations in the golden-brown fur of her ears, the intricate pattern of markings across her cheekbones that resembled freckles but formed deliberate designs, the careful precision of her movements. "Thank you," he said when she finished, their eyes meeting briefly. Something passed between them, a moment of connection, quickly broken when Garo called from across the clearing. "The meat is prepared for transport," he announced. "Unless the Skyfallen needs to be carried back like a newling." "I can walk," Ethan replied, pushing himself upright despite the pain. "And I have a name." "Names are earned here," Garo countered, hoisting a significant portion of the butchered predator onto his shoulders. "You've taken your first step toward one today, perhaps." It might have been the closest thing to approval Ethan would get from the hostile warrior. The journey back to the village was arduous, with each hunter carrying portions of their prize. Despite his injury, Ethan insisted on bearing his share of the smaller game they'd also managed to catch. By the time they reached the village, his vision was swimming with exhaustion and pain. Word of their encounter with the Khazari spread quickly. As they entered the village, people gathered to see the rare trophy. When Taru loudly proclaimed how the Sky-Fallen struck first blood against the Deathstalker, expressions of shock and reluctant respect rippled through the crowd. The elders emerged from their dwelling, examining the kill with approving nods. Elder Sora's gaze lingered on Ethan's bandaged arm and the blood-stained tunic he wore. "It seems you have warrior instinct despite your strange appearance," she observed. "The ancestors guide every hand that feeds the tribe." He was adequate, Rima stated, which Ethan was beginning to understand was high praise coming from her. After delivering their portions to the village butchers, Rima led Ethan back to his dwelling. A female healer was waiting, bearing additional medicines and clean bandages. She worked on his wound with brisk efficiency, applying various salves and wrapping it in leaves with healing properties before bandaging it again. "The arm will heal by next moon," she informed him. "The ribs will take longer. No heavy lifting until the pain subsides." With that, she departed, leaving Ethan and Rima alone. "You should rest," Rima said, turning to leave. "Tomorrow." "Wait," Ethan called. "Can we talk for a moment?" Rima hesitated, then nodded, taking a seat on the small stool near his sleeping platform. "I need to understand more about this mating ritual," Ethan said. "What exactly would it entail? And what happens if we complete it successfully?" Rima's ears flattened slightly, embarrassment he'd learned. "The ritual has 3 phases," she explained, her tail flicking with nervous energy. "First is Koreshka, proving your value to the tribe through labor and hunting, which you have begun. Second is Mechari, the Trial of Shadows, a spiritual journey through the sacred forest where bonds are tested. Few outsiders have ever attempted it." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "The final phase is Timar, the physical and spiritual joining, witnessed by the ancestors and blessed by the elders. And if we complete all this, then we would be recognized as life mates," Rima stated matter-of-factly, "bound by ancient laws and customs. We would share a dwelling, hunt together, protect each other." Her amber eyes fixed on him. "But understand this, Ethan, such a bond is not entered or broken lightly. In our culture, it is for life." The weight of her words hung between them. Ethan swallowed hard, trying to comprehend the magnitude of their situation. "And what about you?" he finally asked. "Do you want this?" Rima's gaze dropped to her hands. "What I want matters little. The law is ancient and absolute. That's not what I asked." Her ears twitched in agitation. "I never sought a mate. My path was to become lead hunter to serve the tribe through my skills." She looked up at him, a flash of vulnerability crossing her features before disappearing behind her usual composed mask. "But I also do not wish for exile. The deep forest holds dangers few survive." Before Ethan could respond, she stood abruptly. "Rest now. Your body needs healing." At the doorway, she paused. "Tomorrow we continue Koreshka. You've shown potential in hunting, but there are many other skills to master." With that, she was gone, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts and the throbbing pain in his arm. The enormity of his situation weighed heavily on him. In a few short days, he'd gone from space explorer to crash survivor to prospective husband in an alien tribal society. The absurdity would have made him laugh if his ribs didn't hurt so much. Yet despite everything, he couldn't deny a growing fascination with Rima and her people. Their connection to their environment, their complex social structures, their fierce independence, all spoke of a sophisticated civilization that had adapted perfectly to their world. And Rima herself, there was something compelling about her strength, her intelligence, her unwavering sense of duty. Under different circumstances, getting to know her better might have been something to look forward to rather than a sentence imposed by cultural misunderstanding. Ethan drifted into uneasy sleep, dreams filled with amber eyes and forest shadows. The next several days fell into a pattern. Each morning, Rima would collect Ethan from his dwelling and assign him different tasks around the village. Despite his injured arm, he participated in food preparation, learned to identify edible plants, helped mend fishing nets used in the nearby river, and even attempted to craft simple tools under the guidance of the tribe's artisans. Some tasks he managed adequately. Others revealed his limitations. His attempts at pottery were disastrous, his hands lacking the instinctive understanding of the clay that even young children in the tribe possessed. His basket weaving was barely functional, the finished products lopsided and full of gaps. Yet there were areas where he excelled. His knowledge of physics helped improve the design of a water-lifting mechanism the tribe used. His experience with navigation proved useful when he helped map nearby foraging grounds. And to everyone's surprise, including his own, he showed a remarkable talent for the tribe's stringed musical instruments, his fingers finding harmonies that pleased even the most critical tribal elders. Throughout it all, Rima remained his constant companion and evaluator. Though still reserved, her hostility had given way to a professional assessment of his abilities. Occasionally, Ethan would catch her watching him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher, something between curiosity and confusion, as if he were a puzzle she couldn't solve. Their conversations gradually grew less stilted. During meal breaks or evening rest periods, Ethan would tell her about Earth and his explorations, and she in turn shared stories of the great hunts and tribal histories. His translator improved with each passing day, picking up nuances of the tribal language that had initially been lost. On the fifth day, as they sat by a small stream, where Rima was teaching him to identify fish movements beneath the surface, Ethan found the courage to ask the question that had been bothering him. "Why does Garo hate me so much?" he inquired, watching her skilled hands weave a small trap from reeds. Rima's ears twitched, a gesture he now recognized as meaning she was considering how much to reveal. "Garo and I grew up together," she finally said. "We trained as hunters under the same mentor. For many seasons, he has believed we would eventually become mates. But you didn't want that. Garo is a skilled hunter and warrior. He would bring status to any mate." Her tail flicked in what Ethan had come to recognize as discomfort. "But he sees females as possessions, trophies to be claimed like hunting prizes. I have no desire to be owned. Even by tribal custom, I don't think that's how mates should be," Ethan ventured. Her amber eyes met his. "No, the true mating bond is one of equals, each bringing strength to the other." She returned to her weaving. "Garo does not understand this. He sees only that an outsider has claimed what he believes should be his." "I haven't claimed anything," Ethan reminded her. "This whole situation was an accident." "Perhaps," Rima murmured, so quietly he barely caught it. Yet accidents sometimes reveal paths that intention never would. Before Ethan could ask what she meant, a young tribe member came running to them, breathing hard with excitement. "Hunter Rima, Elder Sora requests your presence, yours and the Sky-Fallen's. They have decided about the trial." Rima's expression grew solemn. She rose gracefully, signaling Ethan to follow. "Then it is time. The elders have set the date for Mechari." The central fire pit was surrounded by much of the tribe when they arrived. The elders sat in there. Elevated seats, faces grave. Ethan noticed additional decorations had been added to the area. Strange symbols painted on the ground and hanging totems that rattled softly in the breeze. Elder Sora raised her hands for silence as Rima and Ethan approached. "Hunter Rima, Skyfallen Ethan," she addressed them formally. "The council has observed the progress of Koreshka. While the Skyfallen lacks the natural skills of our people, he has shown willingness to learn and contribute. His blood debt with Teru and his strike against the Xari have been considered." The male elder beside her, Mako, Ethan had learned, continued. "The ancestors have spoken through the sacred smoke. The time has come for Mechari, the trial of shadows. In 3 days, when the moons align, you will enter the sacred grove and face the trial together." Elder Sora fixed them with an intense gaze. "If you emerge successful, the final phase of your bond will be blessed. If you fail," she left the consequence unstated, but everyone understood. 3 days is not enough time for proper preparation, Rima protested. "The Skyfallen Ethan is still learning our ways." The ancestral signs are clear, the third elder, Nala, replied. This is the time. Perhaps his foreign nature brings a different strength to the trial. You will be permitted 2 days of isolation for preparation, Elder Sora decreed. No duties, no distractions. Use this time wisely. With a gesture of dismissal, the formal audience ended, though the crowd lingered, whispers spreading rapidly. Garo pushed his way forward, his expression thunderous. This is an abomination, he declared loud enough for all to hear. An outsider cannot possibly understand the sacred bond or survive the trial of shadows. I invoke Tarkash. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Even the elders appeared surprised. Garo. Elder Mako's voice boomed. You invoke the ancient right of challenge? Consider carefully. Once spoken, it cannot be withdrawn. I have considered, Garo replied defiantly. By ancient law, I have a right to challenge any claiming of a tribal hunter if I believe the match unworthy. I challenge the Sky-Fallen's right to attempt meckery with Rima. Ethan stepped forward. What exactly does this challenge entail? Elder Sora's expression was grave. Tarkash is combat for the right to proceed. If Garo defeats you, the bond claim is voided, and Rima is released from the consequences of your action. And if I win? Ethan asked, already knowing he stood little chance against the powerful warrior. Then your right to attempt meckery is unquestioned, she replied. No further challenges may be issued. Rima moved to protest, but Elder Sora silenced her with a raised hand. The challenge has been issued according to ancient law. It must be answered. Skyfallen Ethan, do you accept Tarkash? Ethan looked at Rima, saw the conflict in her eyes. Concern for him mixed with frustration at being treated like a prize to be won. He thought of the consequences they both faced if he refused. I accept, he said firmly, ignoring the pain that still lingered in his ribs. Then it is decided, Elder Sora declared. Tomorrow at midday, Tarkash will be held. Until then, both challengers are to meditate and prepare. No contact is permitted between them. As the crowd dispersed, Rima caught Ethan's arm. Why did you accept? She hissed. Garo has been training as a warrior since childhood. You still favor your injured arm. What choice did I have? Ethan replied. If I refused, what would happen to you? To us. Her ears flattened with worry. There are rules to Tarkash. Weapons, but no killing. First blood from 3 wounds determines victory. Garo will exploit every advantage. Then I'll need to find advantages of my own, Ethan said with more confidence than he felt. Is there somewhere I can learn about previous Tarkash challenges? Study the rules more closely? Rima's expression shifted subtly, a glimmer of respect appearing. The Knowledge Keeper can show you the memory bark recordings. Kulme. She led him to a dwelling he hadn't visited before, a structure built into the hollow of an ancient tree trunk. Inside, an elderly tribe member surrounded by shelves of bark tablets and strange crystalline objects greeted them. After Rima explained their need, the Knowledge Keeper, Lhasa, produced several records of past challenges. Ethan spent hours studying the traditional combat forms, the rules, the arena layout. Rima remained with him, offering insights and explanations, pointing out successful tactics from past victories. Garo favors his right side, she noted as they watched a memory bark recording of one of his previous fights. His tail gives him balance, but he rarely accounts for its position in combat. A skilled opponent could use that. As evening fell, Lhasa reminded them that Ethan was supposed to prepare in isolation. With reluctance, Rima rose to leave. Ethan, she said softly, using his name with a gentleness he hadn't heard before. You don't have to do this. There may be another way. Perhaps we could leave the village, find, and live as exiles, hunted by the shadow beasts. He shook his head. I got us into this mess with my ignorance. I won't abandon you to face the consequences alone. Something shifted in her expression, a softening around her eyes, a slight forward tilt of her ears that he'd come to recognize as a sign of emotional openness. Then listen carefully, she said, her voice low and intense. Garo fights with pride and anger. Let them be his weakness. Move like water around stone. Fluid, patient, finding the path of least resistance. She hesitated, then reached out, her fingers brushing against his hand in a gesture so brief he might have imagined it. Trust your instincts, Skyfallen. They have served you well so far. With that, she was gone, leaving Ethan to wonder if he'd just seen a glimpse of something more than reluctant cooperation in her amber eyes. The arena for Tarkash was a circular clearing near the village center, surrounded by elaborately carved wooden posts. By midday, it seemed the entire tribe had gathered to watch. They formed a ring around the space, their expressions ranging from excited to solemn. Ethan entered from the eastern side as tradition dictated, dressed in the simple garments provided for the challenge, loose-fitting trousers and an open vest that left his arms free. He carried the weapons he was permitted to choose, a short staff and a blunted knife. His injured arm had been treated with additional healing salves that morning, and while it still ached, he had nearly full mobility. From the western entrance came Garo, his powerful physique adorned with traditional markings painted across his chest and face. He carried similar weapons, though his staff was noticeably heavier. His ears were alert, tail swishing with anticipation, confidence evident in every movement. The elders sat on a raised platform overlooking the arena. Elder Sora raised her staff, and silence fell over the crowd. Tarkash is an ancient rite, her voice carried across the clearing. It tests not only strength of body, but clarity of purpose. Today, Garo challenges the right of the Skyfallen Ethan to proceed to Mechari with Hunter Rima. Both have accepted the terms. 3 bloods determine victory. Death blows are forbidden on pain of exile. She struck her staff against a hollow log beside her, producing a resonant boom that signaled the start of the challenge. Garo wasted no time, charging forward with an aggressive strike of his staff aimed at Ethan's head. Ethan barely managed to block, the impact jarring his arms and forcing him back several steps. The crowd murmured appreciatively at the forceful opening. First lesson, Sky Thing, Garo growled, pressing his advantage with a series of swift attacks. Our males fight for what is ours. Ethan dodged a particularly vicious swipe, responding with a probing jab that Garo easily knocked aside. Rima isn't property to be claimed, he retorted, circling cautiously. That's why she rejected you. The taunt had its intended effect. Garo's ears flattened with rage, and he launched a furious assault, sacrificing technique for power. Ethan retreated, using the entire space of the arena, letting Garo expend energy chasing him. Stand and fight, Garo demanded, frustration evident in his voice. The crowd was beginning to murmur at Ethan's defensive strategy. As you wish, Ethan replied, suddenly stepping inside Garo's reach as the warrior committed to another powerful swing. Using the momentum of Garo's own attack, Ethan diverted the staff downward and slashed across Garo's forearm with his blunted knife. Not deeply, but enough to draw first blood. The crowd gasped. Garo stared at the thin line of blood in disbelief before his expression darkened with fury. Lucky strike, he snarled, adjusting his stance to a more controlled posture. It won't happen again. The fight intensified. Garo was clearly the superior warrior, his movements fluid and powerful, but Ethan had studied well. He used the arena's space, conserved his energy, and looked for openings rather than creating them. Still, he couldn't avoid Garo's relentless attacks forever. A sweeping low strike caught Ethan's ankle, sending him sprawling to the ground. Before he could roll away, Garo's knife slashed across his shoulder, drawing a line of blood. One each, Garo announced with satisfaction, backing away to allow Ethan to regain his feet. Ethan touched the wound, superficial but stinging. He refocused, remembering Rima's advice, move like water around stone. As Garo advanced again, Ethan began to alter his pattern, no longer simply retreating but flowing around Garo's attacks, changing direction unpredictably. The strategy frustrated Garo, whose strength relied on direct confrontation. His attacks became more forceful but less precise. When he overextended on a thrust, Ethan slipped past his guard and landed a solid blow with his staff to Garo's temple. Not enough to cause serious injury, but sufficient to draw blood from a split eyebrow. 2-1, Ethan said quietly, backing away. Garo wiped the blood from his eye, his breathing heavy. The crowd was silent now, fully engaged in the unexpected contest. No one had anticipated the Sky Fallen lasting this long, let alone taking the lead. With a roar of determination, Garo launched himself forward in a final, all-out assault. Ethan met the attack head-on this time, their staffs clashing repeatedly as they fought for advantage. Garo's superior strength began to tell. He forced Ethan back step by step toward the edge of the arena. In a desperate gamble, Ethan abruptly dropped to one knee, causing Garo's powerful swing to pass over his head. As the warrior's momentum carried him forward, Ethan drove the end of his staff into Garo's midsection, knocking the wind from him. It should have been enough to create separation, but Garo recovered more quickly than expected. His knife slashed down, catching Ethan across the chest as he attempted to rise, a second blood drawn. 2-2, Garo panted, a vicious smile spreading across his face. The next asides, they circled each other warily, both injured, both tired. Ethan could feel warm blood trickling down his chest, his injured arm throbbing with renewed pain. Garo was breathing heavily, the cut above his eye forcing him to blink frequently. The warrior lunged again, but this time Ethan saw something in his movement, a slight tell, a shifting of weight that Rima had pointed out in the memory bark recordings. As Garo committed to his attack, Ethan sidestepped not away but toward him inside the arc of his swing. Their bodies collided. For a brief moment, they grappled chest to chest. Ethan dropped his weapons and grabbed Garo's tail, a move so unexpected and culturally taboo that a shock ran through the watching crowd. Instinctively, Garo jerked away, his balance completely disrupted. As he stumbled backward, Ethan snatched up his dropped knife and made a single, precise cut across Garo's cheek. Third blood. Silence descended on the arena. Garo stood frozen, disbelief evident in his wide eyes. Then Elder Sora's staff struck the hollow log 3 times. The challenge is concluded, she announced. 3 bloods have been drawn. The Skyfallen Ethan is victorious. His right to proceed to Mechari with Hunter Rima is confirmed by ancient law. For several heartbeats, no one moved. Then Garo threw down his weapons with a cry of rage and stalked from the arena without the traditional acknowledgement of defeat. His supporters followed, casting dark looks at Ethan. The remaining spectators burst into excited conversation. Ethan sank to one knee, exhaustion overtaking him now that the fight was over. A shadow fell across him, and he looked up to find Rima standing over him, her expression a complex mixture of amazement, concern, and something deeper he couldn't name. "You fought with both cunning and honor," she said, helping him to his feet. "Few would have thought to use an opponent's tale against them." "Was that not allowed?" Ethan asked, suddenly concerned. The corner of Rima's mouth twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "It was not forbidden, merely unexpected. Our tales are sensitive, private. To touch another's without permission is considered intimate or offensive." "Oh." Ethan felt heat rise to his face. "Add that to the list of cultural taboos I've broken, I guess." "This one served you well," she replied, supporting him as they left the arena. "Kulme, the healer should see to your wounds. Tomorrow we begin preparation for Mechari in earnest." As they moved through the parting crowd, Ethan was surprised to notice a change in how the villagers regarded him. Where before there had been suspicion and disdain, now there were looks of curiosity and even grudging respect. Several younger tribe members nodded to him as he passed. "You've earned a measure of acceptance today," Rima observed quietly. "Defeating a warrior of Garo's standing is no small feat." "I didn't defeat him through strength," Ethan admitted. "I just used what you taught me about his fighting style." Rima's ears perked forward, a sign of pleasure, he'd learned. "That is exactly why you won. You listened and learned instead of relying solely on physical power. That is the way of our hunters. Observation before action." The healer's dwelling was cool and fragrant with medicinal herbs. As Ethan's wounds were cleaned and dressed, his thoughts turned to the coming trial. He had survived the challenge, but Mekari sounded far more dangerous and mysterious. "What exactly happens in the trial of shadows?" he asked when they were alone again, walking slowly back toward his dwelling. Rima's expression grew solemn. "Mekari takes place in the sacred grove, a part of the forest where the veil between physical and spiritual is thin. It is both a real journey and a journey of the inner self." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Pairs seeking confirmation of their bond must face the shadow beasts, creatures that manifest from our deepest fears and doubts. Actual creatures or hallucinations? Both. Neither. They are real enough to harm you, yet they are born from what lies within. Her amber eyes met his. The trial reveals truth between potential mates. No secrets, no barriers survive the grove. Many pairs discover they are not truly compatible when their deepest selves are revealed. Ethan considered this soberly. And what happens if we fail? If we cannot overcome the shadow beast together, we will not find the path out of the grove. She looked away. Those who fail either die within or emerge broken, their bond shattered beyond repair. That's intense for what started as an accidental ear touch, Ethan remarked, trying to lighten the suddenly heavy atmosphere. Rima didn't smile. The ancestors believe that there are no accidents in matters of bonding. They say that souls recognize each other, even when minds do not. They had reached Ethan's dwelling. At the entrance, Rima paused. "Rest today. Tomorrow at dawn, meet me at the east edge of the village. We will enter isolation to prepare our minds and spirits for the trial." As she turned to leave, Ethan caught her hand impulsively. "Rima, thank you for teaching me how to survive the challenge, for not giving up on me despite how this all started." She looked down at their joined hands, then back to his face. Something vulnerable flickered in her eyes. "Perhaps it is I who should thank you," she said softly. "You fought for my freedom of choice today, even against a superior opponent." She gently withdrew her hand. "Sleep well, Ethan of the sky. Tomorrow we begin a different kind of journey." As Ethan watched her walk away, tail swaying gracefully with each step, he realized with sudden clarity that his feelings about their situation had shifted. What had begun as an unfortunate cultural misunderstanding had become something else. Something that made the prospect of facing shadow monsters in a mystical grove seem almost worthwhile. "What have you gotten yourself into, Ethan?" he murmured to himself, touching the bandage on his chest. But for the first time since his crash landing, the question held a note of anticipation rather than dread. The preparation site was a small stone structure built beside a natural hot spring at the eastern edge of the village. Steam rose from bubbling pools, creating a perpetual mist that clung to the surrounding vegetation. The air smelled of minerals and the strange flowers that grew in abundance here. Deep purple blooms with luminescent centers that pulsed gently in the dawn light. Rima was waiting when Ethan arrived, dressed in simple garments of undyed fabric. She had removed most of her usual adornments, leaving only a small carved pendant hanging from a cord around her neck. "The cleansing comes first," she explained, leading him into the stone structure. Inside was a single room with two pools, one steaming hot, one shockingly cold, and walls lined with shelves holding various clay pots and bundles of dried plants. "Remove your coverings and enter the hot pool," Rima instructed. When Ethan hesitated, she added, "Nudity has different meaning in our culture. The body is simply the vessel of spirit. There is no shame in it." Despite her reassurance, Ethan felt self-conscious as he disrobed and slipped into the hot pool. The water was almost too hot to bear, heavy with minerals that made his skin tingle. Rima followed, apparently untroubled by either the heat or the intimacy of the situation. "The waters purify the body," she explained, reaching for one of the clay pots. She removed the lid, revealing a paste that smelled strongly of herbs and something like citrus. "This will open the pathways of perception. It may burn at first." She began applying the paste to her own skin in careful patterns, across her forehead, down her arms, around her throat. Ethan followed her example, wincing at the intense, tingling sensation that followed application. "Now we submerge completely," Rima instructed, Hold the breath as long as possible while visualizing a golden light filling your body. When you can hold it no longer, rise and move immediately to the cold pool. The submersion was simultaneously peaceful and intense. Beneath the water, with his lungs burning for air, Ethan experienced a strange clarity of thought. Images flashed through his mind: his life before the crash, the village, Rima's face in various expressions of anger, determination, and that elusive something softer he'd glimpsed occasionally. When he could hold his breath no longer, he burst to the surface and, following Rima's example, immediately moved to the cold pool. The shock of transition was stunning, a full-body jolt that forced a gasp from his lungs. After several moments of intense discomfort, a pleasurable tingling spread through his limbs. The hot opens, the cold seals, Rima explained, her voice taking on a rhythmic quality. Now the spirit is ready to receive wisdom. They dried themselves with soft cloths and dressed in new garments, loose-fitting robes of a material that seemed to shift colors slightly with movement. Rima led him to an adjoining chamber he hadn't noticed before, where a small fire burned in a central pit, releasing fragrant smoke. "We will fast today," she said, gesturing for him to sit across from her with the fire between them. "The body seeks clarity through emptiness. We will speak of fears and truths, preparing our minds for what the grove will reveal." The hours that followed were unlike anything Ethan had experienced. The smoke from the fire seemed to enhance his senses while simultaneously making time feel fluid and strange. They truly talked, about things he would never have imagined discussing with someone he'd known for such a short time. Rima spoke of her childhood, of losing her parents to a forest sickness when she was young, of being raised by the community with higher expectations because of her parents' status as elite hunters. She shared her fears of failing the tribe, of never measuring up to the memory of her mother's legendary hunting skills. In turn, Ethan found himself revealing things he rarely discussed: his strained relationship with his father who had never supported his space exploration dreams, his secret fear that his mission had been a form of running away from personal connections, his guilt over team members who had died during previous expeditions. "The grove will find these truths within us," Rima explained as the day progressed. "The shadow beasts feed on fears, on doubts, on the darkness we hide even from ourselves. Only by recognizing and accepting these aspects can we move through the trial." "What about the physical dangers?" Ethan asked. "You mentioned the shadow beasts can cause real harm." Rima nodded gravely. "They manifest physically, though their forms change based on what they sense within you. Some appear as creatures from nightmare, others as people from your past, others still as twisted versions of your own self. All can wound or kill. How do we fight them?" "Not with weapons," she replied, adding herbs to the fire that made the flames briefly turn blue. "The shadow beasts cannot be defeated through force. They must be acknowledged, understood, and then released. It is a battle of will and truth more than physical strength." As the light outside faded, they moved to the final preparation. Rima produced a small knife with a crystal blade and, without hesitation, made a small cut on her palm. She offered the knife to Ethan. "The blood bond prepares us to sense each other within the grove," she explained. "Without it, we may become separated by the illusions." Ethan copied her action, wincing slightly at the sharp pain. Rima then pressed her bleeding palm against his, their blood mingling. "By blood we enter as two," she recited, her eyes holding his. "By spirit we journey as one. What is hidden shall be revealed. What is feared shall be faced. The true bond will emerge from shadow or break in its embrace." A strange warmth spread up Ethan's arm from where their hands were joined, a sensation that was not entirely physical. For a brief moment, he thought he could sense Rima's emotions, her determination, her lingering doubts, and underneath it all, a surprising current of hope. When they finally separated, Rima poured a healing salve over both their hands. "Now we rest," she said. "The trial begins at dawn." They slept in the preparation chamber on simple pallets placed on either side of the now smoldering fire. Despite the day's emotional intensity and the looming trial, Ethan fell into a deep, dreamless sleep almost immediately. He woke to Rima's gentle touch on his shoulder. Outside, the sky was just beginning to lighten. "It is time," she said simply. They dressed in specially prepared garments, fitted clothing similar to what they would wear for hunting, but adorned with symbolic patterns painted in natural dyes. Rima explained that each symbol offered protection or guidance for the journey ahead. No weapons were permitted in the grove. Instead, each carried only a small pouch of sacred herbs and a crystal vial of water from the hot spring. As they left the preparation site, Ethan was surprised to find the entire village gathered along the path that led toward the deeper forest. The villagers stood in solemn silence, some holding small glowing crystals that cast pools of blue-green light in the pre-dawn dimness. At the edge of the gathered crowd stood the elders, more formally adorned than Ethan had yet seen them. Elder Sora stepped forward as they approached. "Hunter Rima and Skyfall and Ethan," she intoned formally. "You go now to Mechari, the Trial of Shadows. Many enter the sacred grove. Not all return. Those who emerge successful will be acknowledged as true bondmates in the eyes of the ancestors and the tribe." Elder Mako spoke next. "The path will appear when you are ready to see it. Follow the silverleaf trees until they give way to the ancients. When you stand before the stone arch covered in night bloom vines, you will have found the entrance." Elder Nala, her clouded eyes seeming to see beyond the physical, added the final instruction. "Remember, what you see may not be what is. What you fear will become what you face. Only together can two souls navigate the shadows." With these cryptic warnings still echoing in their ears, Ethan and Rima began their journey into the forest. The villagers did not follow. This path was for them alone. As they moved deeper into the woods, the familiar forest gradually changed. The massive trees Ethan had grown accustomed to gave way to something older, more primal. Silverleaf trees appeared, their foliage casting an ethereal glow in the early light. Strange sounds echoed among the trunks, calls that might have been birds but somehow felt wrong, rustling movements that stopped whenever they turned to look. "The grove affects the senses," Rima explained, her voice hushed. "It is said that we are already being tested, even before we reach the entrance." After an hour's trek, the silverleaf trees began to thin, replaced by enormous ancients with bark as black as night. The air grew thicker, heavy with moisture and the scent of decay. Mist curled around their ankles, sometimes forming shapes that disappeared when looked at directly. And then they saw it, the stone arch, just as Elder Mako had described. Weathered gray stone formed a perfect semicircle, large enough for 3 people to walk through side by side. Night bloom vines covered much of its surface, their dark purple flowers closed tight in the daylight. They stopped before it, neither quite ready to take the final step. "Once we enter, there is no turning back until the trial is complete," Remus said quietly. "Are you certain you wish to proceed? There is still time to choose exile instead." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. In the days since their first meeting, she had transformed in his perception from an alien threat to a complex individual he genuinely admired. Her strength, her intelligence, her unwavering sense of duty, all qualities that resonated deeply with him. And beneath her warrior exterior, he'd glimpsed a capacity for compassion and understanding that drew him to her despite the bizarre circumstances of their association. "I'm certain," he replied with conviction that surprised even himself. "Whatever's in there, we'll face it together." Rima's amber eyes held his for a long moment. Then she nodded, reaching out to take his hand. Together, then, they stepped through the arch. The transition was instantaneous and disorienting. One moment they were in the familiar forest. The next, they stood in a landscape that defied logic. The trees around them had grown impossibly tall, their trunks twisting into unnatural shapes that sometimes resembled faces or writhing bodies. The sky above, what little they could see of it through the canopy, pulsed with colors that had no names, casting strange, shifting shadows across the forest floor. The air itself felt alive, pressing against their skin with a curious weight, carrying whispers that danced at the edge of comprehension. The ground beneath their feet seemed to shift subtly with each step, as if reluctant to provide solid footing. "The grove has welcomed us," Rima murmured, her voice sounding simultaneously distant and too close. "Stay alert. The first challenges often come when the mind is still adjusting to this place." Ethan blinked, trying to orient himself. The arch they had passed through was gone, leaving no obvious path back. "Which way do we go?" "There is no fixed direction here," Rima explained. "The grove responds to intention and need. We must simply begin walking with clear purpose to complete the trial and confirm our bond." They moved forward cautiously, still holding hands. The contact provided an anchor in the increasingly dreamlike environment. As they walked, the forest around them constantly changed. Dense undergrowth would suddenly give way to open glades filled with phosphorescent mushrooms, only to close in again with vegetation Ethan had never seen before. Time became meaningless. It might have been minutes or hours when they encountered the first clear sign that they were not alone. A low growl emanated from the shadows to their right. Both froze, turning toward the sound. At first, nothing was visible except shifting darkness. Then the shadows coalesced into a form. A creature with the general shape of a large feline, but wrong in crucial details. Its body seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. It had too many legs, and what should have been a face was a void punctuated by gleaming points of cold light where eyes should be. "Shadow beast," Rima whispered, her grip on Ethan's hand tightening. "Remember, acknowledge, understand, release. Do not show fear." The creature circled them slowly, its movement unsettlingly fluid, as if its joints worked differently than natural anatomy should allow. "It senses doubt," Rima continued quietly. "It will manifest aspects of what we fear most." As if in response to her words, the creature began to change. Its amorphous form stretched and reshaped, the void-like face developing features that Ethan recognized with a shock of disbelief. It wore his father's face, stern, disapproving, eyes cold with judgment. "Of course you'd end up here." The creature spoke in his father's voice, though its mouth moved wrong, too wide, teeth too sharp. "Lost on an alien world, trapped in some primitive ritual. Always chasing stars instead of setting achievable goals. Always disappointing." Ethan's throat tightened. He felt Rima's questioning gaze, but couldn't look away from the apparition. "You'll fail here too," the creature continued, circling closer. "You're not strong enough, not committed enough. You'll break under pressure, just like always." "It feeds on your reaction," Rima warned. "You must acknowledge the fear, but not be consumed by it." Ethan swallowed hard. "I see you," he said to the creature, his voice unsteady at first but strengthening with each word. "I recognize the doubt you represent. My father never believed in my dreams, and part of me internalized that criticism. But that doesn't define me." The creature snarled, the familiar face distorting with rage. It lunged forward suddenly, claws extended toward Ethan's throat. Rima moved to intercept, but Ethan caught her arm, holding her back. "No," he said firmly. "This one's mine." Looking directly into the creature's eyes, he continued, "I acknowledge the fear that I might fail, that I might not be enough. I understand it comes from childhood wounds, but I release its power over me. My worth isn't determined by anyone else's judgment, not even my father's." As he spoke these words with genuine conviction, the creature's form began to waver. The face melted away, the body becoming less substantial. With a final hiss of frustration, it dissolved back into ordinary shadow. Ethan released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That was intense. Rima's expression held new respect. "You face your shadow, beast well. Many hesitate or try to fight physically in their first encounter." "Your instructions were clear," Ethan replied, "though I'm guessing they get harder from here." "The grove tests progressively deeper fears," she confirmed, "and it will test us both individually and as a potential bonded pair." They continued their journey through the ever-changing landscape. Twice more they encountered shadow beasts that targeted Ethan, one taking the form of a fallen comrade from a previous mission, accusing him of abandonment, another appearing as a twisted version of himself, older and bitter, claiming that his life would amount to nothing. Each time, following Rima's guidance, he faced the manifestation with growing confidence, acknowledging the underlying fear without allowing it to control him. Then came Rima's turn. The forest around them suddenly darkened, the temperature dropping precipitously. A keening sound cut through the air, part wind, part mournful cry. Rima's ears flattened against her head, her tail going rigid with tension. "It comes," she whispered, voice tight with anticipation. From the mist emerged a pair of figures, a male and female of Rima's species, but older, their fur graying around the ears. Both wore the distinctive markings of elite hunters, similar to Rima's but more elaborate. "Mother, father," Rima breathed, her usual composure cracking. The figures regarded her with expressions of profound disappointment. "You dishonor our memory," the female spoke, her voice hollow and echoing strangely. "Bonding with an outsider, failing to achieve lead hunter, always second best. We expected greatness," the male added. "Instead, you waste your potential on weakness, compassion for those who deserve none, hesitation when action is needed. You are no daughter of ours." Ethan felt Rima trembling beside him. Her ears were pressed flat against her skull, her eyes wide with pain. "Rima," he said gently, "remember what you taught me. These aren't your parents. They're manifestations of your fears." She nodded jerkily, but seemed unable to speak, transfixed by the apparitions. The shadow beasts wearing her parents' forms began to circle, their movements predatory. "You know you will never measure up," they taunted in unison. "The tribe tolerates you out of respect for our memory, not your merit. And now you further disgrace yourself with this mating. We died in shame, knowing what you would become." Rima's breathing had grown rapid, her pupils dilated with distress. Ethan recognized the signs of someone caught in a trauma response. Without thinking, he moved to stand directly in front of her, breaking her line of sight to the apparitions. "Look at me," he said firmly, placing his hands on her shoulders. "Not at them. Focus on my voice." Her eyes, wild with pain, gradually focused on his face. "Your parents would be proud of you," Ethan continued with absolute conviction. "You're the most skilled hunter in your tribe. You're respected, capable, and compassionate. And that compassion is strength, not weakness. These doubts aren't reality. They're shadows given form." As he spoke, he felt something strange happening, a warmth spreading from where their hands had been blood-bonded, creating a connection that transcended words. Suddenly, he could sense her emotions as if they were his own, the deep-seated fear of inadequacy, the grief of orphanhood, the pressure of living up to a legacy. Acting on instinct, Ethan leaned forward and gently touched his forehead to hers, an intimate gesture that felt right beyond explanation. "I see you," he whispered. "Your strength, your heart, your complete self. Acknowledge your fears, understand their source, but don't let them define you." For a moment, Rima remained frozen. Then she exhaled shakily and straightened, turning to face the shadow beasts with renewed determination. "I see you," she addressed them directly, her voice growing stronger with each word. "You are not my parents, but the embodiment of my fear that I failed them. I understand this fear was born when they died, that as a child, I blamed myself for not being able to save them from the sickness." She took a steadying breath. "I released this false guilt. My parents loved me as I was, not for what I might become. Their pride was unconditional, as is my honor for their memory." The apparitions shrieked in frustration, their forms beginning to disintegrate like smoke in strong wind. They made one last lunge toward Rima, but she stood her ground, unflinching. Within moments, they had vanished completely. In the silence that followed, Rima turned to Ethan, her amber eyes bright with unshed tears and something more, a vulnerability and openness he hadn't seen before. "How did you know?" she asked quietly. About my parents, about my feelings? Ethan looked down at his palm, where the small cut from their blood ritual had been. A faint silvery line remained, pulsing slightly in the strange light of the grove. I felt it, through the blood bond. It was like for a moment, I could sense what you were feeling. Rima nodded slowly. The elders speak of this, when a true potential bond exists. The Mechari ritual can create a temporary sharing of consciousness. Her tail swished with what might have been nervousness. It is considered a positive sign for compatibility. Before Ethan could respond, the landscape around them shifted dramatically. The twisted trees receded, giving way to an open glade illuminated by strange, floating lights. At its center stood a pool of water, so still it resembled black glass, reflecting the impossible colors of the sky above. The mirror pool, Rima breathed. We've reached the heart of the grove. As they approached the pool, the floating lights gathered closer, creating a circle around them. The air hummed with energy. What happens now? Ethan asked, sensing they had reached a crucial point in the trial. The final test, Rima replied. The pool reflects not our physical selves, but the truth of our bond, or lack thereof. Many pairs discover here that they are fundamentally incompatible, despite having overcome individual fears. They stood at the edge of the pool, their reflections dark shadows on its surface. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the water began to ripple from the center outward, though no wind disturbed the air. The ripples caught the light from above, forming patterns that shifted and changed like living things. Gradually, images began to form in the water's surface, moments from Ethan's life intertwined with scenes from Rima's. Their first disastrous meeting in the forest. The village council, Ethan learning tribal crafts. The hunt where he faced the predator. The challenge against Garo. Their preparation ritual. But then came images of things that hadn't happened, potential futures. Ethan and Rima hunting together, moving in perfect coordination, teaching younger tribe members, sitting by a fire during a storm, in comfortable silence, building a dwelling of their own, moments of challenge and joy, conflict and reconciliation. The images shifted faster, blending into one another until they formed a single, unified pattern, complex yet harmonious, like an elaborate tapestry where each thread complemented the others. The pattern is stable, Rima whispered in wonder. The pool shows compatibility. Before Ethan could reply, the surface of the water erupted. From its depths rose a creature unlike any shadow beast they had yet encountered. Massive, formless, shifting between multiple nightmarish aspects in rapid succession. One moment it had too many limbs, the next it was all teeth and eyes. Then it became a swirling void threatening to consume everything around it. What is that? Ethan gasped, instinctively stepping between the creature and Rima. The final guardian, Rima replied, moving to stand beside him rather than behind him. It represents the ultimate fear in bonding, the fear of complete vulnerability, of being truly known by another. The creature roared, a sound that existed as much in their minds as in the air around them. It struck without warning, a tendril of darkness lashing out toward them both. They dodged in opposite directions, the attack missing them by inches. How do we face this one? Ethan called as the creature regrouped for another assault. Together, Rima replied. This is not an individual fear, but one we both must overcome. The fear of true intimacy, of complete trust. The creature attacked again, this time splitting into two forms that targeted them separately. Ethan found himself facing a version that wore aspects of everyone he'd ever cared for and lost. Family members, friends, colleagues. Simultaneously, he glimpsed Rima battling a manifestation composed of her tribe's expectations and traditions. We need to rejoin, Rima called, struggling against her opponent. The guardian gains power from separation. Ethan fought his way toward her, each step requiring immense, while as the creature placed emotional and physical barriers in his path. Memories of betrayals, disappointments, losses, all designed to convince him that connection led only to pain. Finally, he reached Rima, their hands finding each other's in the chaotic darkness. The moment they touched, that strange warmth from the blood bond surged between them again, stronger than before. Without discussion, they moved as one, turning to face the now unified creature together. I acknowledged the fear of vulnerability. They spoke in unison, the words coming naturally, as if rehearsed. I understand the risk in truly being known by another, but I choose connection over isolation, trust over fear. The creature thrashed violently, its form becoming increasingly unstable. Ethan looked at Rima, finding her eyes already on his. In that moment, the connection between them transcended the physical. He could sense her thoughts, her feelings, the essence of who she was, just as she could sense his. "I see you," Ethan said softly, the words carrying deeper meaning than ever before. "I see you," Rima echoed, her free hand rising to gently touch his face. The creature gave one final, deafening roar and shattered like glass, fragments of darkness dissolving in a mist that was quickly absorbed by the pool. The floating lights brightened, bathing them in a warm glow that felt like approval. As the light intensified, the landscape around them began to fade. The last thing Ethan saw was Rima's face, transformed by wonder and something that might have been joy. Then darkness claimed them both. Ethan awoke to filtered sunlight and the familiar sounds of the forest. Normal forest sounds, not the otherworldly cacophony of the grove. He was lying on soft moss beside a small, natural pool of water. Rima was beside him, already sitting up, looking around with an expression of amazement. "We're out," she said when she noticed him stirring. "We completed Mechari." Ethan sat up carefully, taking inventory of his body. He felt exhausted, yet energized, as if he'd been through both a tremendous ordeal and a profound healing. The cut on his palm had become a silvery line, a permanent mark rather than a healing wound. "How long were we in there?" he asked, noting that the sun's position suggested mid-afternoon. "Time moves differently in the grove," Rima replied. "For us, it felt like many hours. Out here," she gestured toward the sun. "We entered at dawn. It's the same day." They were sitting near the stone arch, though it now looked like an ordinary geological formation. The night bloom vines closed and unremarkable. No sign remained of the mystical barrier they had crossed. "So what happens now?" Ethan asked, the reality of their situation coming back into focus. "We passed the trial. Does that mean?" "It means the ancestors and the grove have confirmed compatibility for bonding," Remus said, her tone more gentle than he'd yet heard it. "The final decision remains ours. If we choose to complete Timar, the final bonding ritual, the tribe will recognize us as life mates. If not," she hesitated. "Having passed Mechari, we would not face exile, but such a rejection of confirmed compatibility is rare." Ethan studied her face, remembering the visions they had shared in the pool, possible futures together that had seemed not just viable, but strangely right, despite the circumstances that had brought them together. "What do you want, Rima?" he asked quietly. "Not what tradition demands, or what's expected. What do you truly want?" Her amber eyes met his, more open and vulnerable than he'd ever seen them. "Before you crashed into my forest, my path was clear. Now," her tail swished thoughtfully, "what I've seen in the grove, what I've felt through our connection, it suggests a different path, one I never considered but can no longer ignore." She reached out, taking his hand where the silver mark shimmered. "I want to explore what this could be, not because of an accidental ear touch or tribal law, but because of what we discovered together in the trial." A weight Ethan hadn't realized he was carrying lifted from his chest. "I want that too," he admitted. "When I first landed here, all I wanted was to fix my ship and leave. Now," he looked around at the forest, then back to Rima. "Now I'm not so sure that's what I want at all." Rima's ears perked forward, the expression of happiness he'd come to recognize. "Then we return to the village and prepare for Timar. But first," her expression turned mischievous, a side of her he'd rarely glimpsed. She leaned forward and deliberately, purposefully brushed her fingers across his ear. The gesture sent an unexpected shiver through him. "What was that for?" he asked, smiling despite himself. To show that this time, there's nothing accidental about it, she replied, rising gracefully to her feet and offering him her hand. Kulme, the tribe will be waiting to hear of our trial. Together, they began the journey back to the village, walking side by side through the now ordinary forest that had become, against all expectations, a place Ethan might call home. The village erupted in celebration when they emerged from the forest path. Clearly, their success in the trial had not been a foregone conclusion. Many faces registered surprise along with approval. The elders stood waiting at the village entrance, their expressions solemn yet pleased. Elder Sora raised her staff as they approached. You have returned from Mechari whole and together, she announced formally. The grove has spoken. What say you of your trial? We faced the shadow beasts and the guardian, Rima replied, her voice strong and clear. We were tested individually and as potential bondmates. The mirror pool showed compatibility. Murmurs of appreciation spread through the gathered crowd. Elder Mako nodded sagely. And what is your decision regarding Timar? He asked, addressing them both. Ethan looked at Rima, who gave him a slight nod of encouragement. They had discussed this on the walk back, agreeing that since Ethan had been the one to inadvertently initiate the process, he should be the one to declare their intention to complete it. We choose to proceed with the final bonding, Ethan announced, not because of obligation or accident, but because of what we discovered in the grove. A cheer went up from the younger tribe members. The elders exchanged satisfied glances. Then it shall be so, Elder Sora declared. Timar will be held at tomorrow's sunset. Today, you rest and prepare. As the crowd began to disperse, a tense figure pushed through. Garo, his face still bearing the scar from Ethan's victory in the challenge. His expression was unreadable as he approached them. Rima tensed slightly, but Ethan placed a calming hand on her arm. They had faced far worse than Garo in the grove. To their surprise, Garo stopped before them and bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect they had not expected. You survived Mechari, he stated simply. If you do, it suggests the ancestors see something in your pairing that was not evident to others. His gaze shifted to Ethan, reluctant admiration in his eyes. Perhaps there is strength in you that does not show on the surface, Skyfallen. With that cryptic acknowledgement, he turned and walked away. That was unexpected, Ethan commented as they continued toward the village center. The completion of Mechari carries significant weight in our culture, Rima explained. Even Garo must respect the judgment of the grove. They were led to separate dwelling areas to rest and prepare for the next day's ceremony. As was traditional, they would spend their last night as bonded individuals in reflection before the final joining. Ethan found his temporary quarters had been improved in his absence. A more comfortable sleeping platform, fresh water, and various small comforts had been added. It seemed his status in the tribe had risen considerably. He was just settling in when a knock came at his door. Opening it, he found Taru standing outside, his expression friendly. The elders sent me, he explained. As your blood debt holder, I am to help you prepare for Timar. There are traditions you must learn. Over the next few hours, Taru patiently explained the elaborate ceremony that would take place at sunset the following day. Ethan would be expected to present Rima with a handcrafted gift symbolizing his commitment, participate in a ritual feast, and finally complete the formal ear grooming that had started their entire journey, this time with full understanding of its significance. The most important part comes after the public ceremony. Taru explained, his tone becoming more serious. You and Rima will complete the physical and spiritual joining in private. This is when the temporary bond you experienced in the grove becomes permanent. And what exactly does that entail? Ethan asked, curious and slightly apprehensive. Taru's ears twitched in the equivalent of a smile. That is for bondmates to discover. But I can tell you this. Once complete, you will carry a part of each other always. It is said that true bondmates can sense each other's emotions even at a distance, know when the other is in danger, find each other even in the darkest forest. After Taru left, Ethan spent hours working on the bonding gift for Rima. Taru had helped him gather the necessary materials. Rare wood from the silverleaf trees, colorful feathers from forest birds, sinew for binding, and small crystals similar to those used in the preparation ritual. With tools borrowed from the village artisans, Ethan carefully crafted a pendant that combined elements of his world with Rima's, a star pattern surrounding a carved hunter symbol. By morning, the gift was complete, and Ethan finally allowed himself to rest, his dreams filled with images from the grove and possibilities for the future. The day of Timar dawned clear and bright. The entire village was in motion from early morning, preparing the central area for the ceremony. Garlands of flowers and glowing crystals were hung from surrounding trees. A feast was prepared, featuring the finest foods the forest provided. Musicians practiced traditional melodies on instruments made from hollow wood and stretched skins. Ethan was visited by several tribal members who helped him prepare, dressing him in ceremonial garments of deep blue and silver, applying symbolic markings to his face and hands in patterns that told the story of his journey from sky-fallen stranger to accepted bondmate. As sunset approached, he was led to the village center, where the entire tribe had gathered in their finest attire. The central fire burned with those distinctive blue-green flames, casting magical light across the assembled faces. A hush fell as Rima appeared from the opposite side of the clearing. Ethan's breath caught at the sight of her. She was dressed in garments of gold and deep forest green, her fur brushed to a lustrous shine. The markings across her face and arms had been highlighted with some kind of shimmering substance that caught the firelight. Her amber eyes found his immediately, and the connection between them, that strange bond forged in the grove, hummed with recognition. Elder Sora stood between them at the fire pit, arms raised to signal the beginning of the ceremony. Today we witness Timar, the final bonding of Hunter Rima and Skyfallen Ethan, she announced. Their path began in misunderstanding, but has led to mutual respect and choice. The ancestors have blessed this union through the trial of Mechari. Now, they come before the tribe to declare their intention to bond for life. Elder Mako stepped forward with a ceremonial bowl containing a dark liquid. "Drink of the forest's heart," he instructed, offering the bowl first to Rima, then to Ethan. "As you share this essence, so shall you share your lives." The liquid tasted of earth and honey, with an underlying bitterness that gave way to unexpected sweetness. As Ethan swallowed, warmth spread through him, enhancing his awareness of Rima across the fire. Elder Nala spoke next, her clouded eyes seeming to see far beyond the physical gathering. "Exchange the symbols of your commitment, that all may witness your choice." Rima moved first, approaching Ethan with graceful steps. In her hands, she held a carefully crafted band of woven leather and metal, decorated with symbols he recognized from the hunter's language: protection, loyalty, shared path. "This I give freely," she said, loud enough for all to hear as she fastened it around his wrist. A bond of choice, not obligation. Then it was Ethan's turn. He approached her, suddenly nervous despite their shared ordeal in the grove. This was real, public, witnessed by an entire community that had initially seen him as an unwelcome intruder. "This I give freely," he echoed, presenting the pendant he had crafted. A union of different worlds finding common ground. As he spoke, he carefully placed the necklace around her neck, the carved symbols resting just below her throat. Rima's eyes widened slightly as she examined the gift, recognizing the significance of the combined symbols. Her ears perked forward in that expression of pleasure he had come to treasure. Elder Sora nodded in approval. The gifts are exchanged. Now comes the moment of claiming, this time with full knowledge and consent. This was the part Ethan had been most anxious about, the formal repetition of the ear touch that had started everything, but now as a deliberate act with profound cultural significance. Rima turned slightly, presenting the delicate fur-covered ear that he had accidentally touched that first day in the forest. The symbolism was not lost on anyone present, the unintended touch now made intentional. With steady hands, Ethan reached up and gently, deliberately stroked the soft fur of her ear, his fingers tracing from base to tip in the traditional grooming gesture Taru had taught him. The significance of the moment hung in the air between them. What had begun as a cultural misunderstanding transformed into a chosen bond. A murmur of approval rippled through the watching tribe. Then, in a move that surprised even the elders, Rima reached up and touched Ethan's ear in return, adapting the ritual to acknowledge that their bond was one of equals, not of claimant and claimed. Her touch was gentle, almost reverential, and despite the cultural differences in their physical forms, the gesture carried the same profound meaning. The claiming is reciprocal and freely chosen, Elder Sora announced, genuine pleasure in her voice. As witnessed by the tribe and blessed by the ancestors, Hunter Rima and Skyfall and Ethan are now recognized as life-bonded mates. Cheers erupted around them. The formality of the ceremony gave way to celebration. Music, dancing, feasting. Tribe members who had once been wary of Ethan now approached to offer congratulations and welcome him properly into their community. Throughout the festivities, Ethan and Rima remained close, the bond between them growing stronger with each passing hour. They participated in traditional dances, shared ceremonial foods, received blessings from various tribal members. Ethan was surprised to find himself genuinely enjoying the celebration, feeling a sense of belonging he had rarely experienced even among his own kind. As the night deepened and many of the celebrants began to drift away to their dwellings, Elder Sora approached them once more. "The public ceremony is complete," she said quietly. "Now you must complete the final joining in private. A new dwelling has been prepared for you at the eastern edge of the village, built during your trial, as is our custom for new bondmates." Following her directions, Ethan and Rima made their way through the village, accepting final congratulations from those they passed. The new dwelling was beautiful, larger than Ethan's temporary quarters, integrated into the lower branches of a massive tree, with a spacious interior illuminated by softly glowing crystals. Inside, they found everything needed for a life together: sleeping area, cooking space, storage for hunting gear, even a small pool fed by a natural spring for bathing. It was a perfect blend of functionality and comfort. When they were finally alone, a momentary awkwardness fell between them. For all they had experienced together, the dangers, the trial, the connection in the grove, this moment of privacy brought new awareness of the commitment they had made. "So," Ethan said, breaking the silence with a slight smile, "all this because I accidentally touched your ear." Rima's ears twitched with amusement. The ancestors say there are no accidents in matters of bonding. She moved closer, her amber eyes holding his. "What we experienced in the grove, that connection, it wasn't created by ritual or tradition. It was already there, waiting to be discovered." "I felt it too," Ethan admitted, reaching out to take her hand. The mark on his palm seemed to pulse in response to her touch. In the pool, those visions of possible futures, they didn't feel foreign or imposed. They felt right. Rima nodded, her free hand rising to touch the pendant he had given her. "There is one final step to complete the bond," she said softly. "It is more intimate than what is shared in public ceremony." "The permanent joining Teru mentioned?" "Yes." She led him to the center of the dwelling, where a small fire burned in a stone-lined pit similar to the one from their preparation ritual. Beside it lay a crystalline bowl containing a salve that glowed with soft blue light. "This finalizes what began with the blood bond before the grove. It makes the connection between us permanent, a true life bond." They sat facing each other across the fire. Rima took the bowl and dipped her fingers into the luminous substance. "With this mark, I accept you as my life mate," she said, her voice tender as she traced a pattern on his forehead, then his chest above his heart. "My strength,